Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you guys about why I moved away from using double action, single action guns. Okay, so here I got a Beretta 92. For those of you that may not be aware of how this older technology works, basically put your magazine in, put it around the chamber. Your hammer is in the rear position. To holster this, basically you decock this. You push down on this lever here. Right now, when you push down and you leave it down, basically you got a dead trigger. Your gun doesn't work. You have to push up. Okay, so it's a down and up action. One of the problems with this is if you rack the slide, it is easy to accidentally leave that in the down position. That's why when you shoot this, you typically shoot this with your thumbs up, pressing up against that little switch there to make sure it's in the up position. Okay, so this is the gun right here. This Beretta 92 is the gun that I used when I was taking my self-defense classes, right? And also when I was becoming an instructor, right? I mean, the first couple of classes that you take, they're basically just teaching, you're just learning to teach people how to target shoot, teaching people just basic gun safety. At that level, people are mostly just going to the gun range, basically a two-dimensional gun range where they're just shooting in one direction, shooting at paper targets. Okay, it's not until you get to the self-defense classes where you're really concerned about holstering the gun, moving and shooting, moving to concealment or cover and shooting. So when you start introducing movement and shooting from awkward positions, coming in and out of the holster, that's when you really have to concern yourself with, how safe is the gun. I want to make sure I don't shoot myself. Okay, so at the time, right, and now we're going back about more than 12 years. Okay, I did not feel comfortable with this Glock 17. I had this Glock 17 before, so I had a choice, right? I could have took my self-defense classes with the Beretta 92 or the Glock 17. And going into those classes, I did not have I wasn't comfortable with the idea of using a Glock 17, which in my mind I associated as with a single action gun, even though it's not. I considered it more of a single action gun, and I felt a lot more comfortable going into those self-defense classes with the Beretta 92, which had a decocker where the hammer is rested down, and I could visually see it. Right, so there was this visual thing there where I could see that the hammer is down, and not only could I see it, but all the instructors, because remember I'm a student at this point, the instructors can see it that it's down. I noticed that when you have a lot of people in the class, right? So this was a class that had like some 20, 30 people in it. I could tell that the instructors were a lot more concerned with how people with Glocks and 1911s in that class, they were more concerned with how they were reholstering the gun, okay, versus how the people with the double action, single action guns were reholstering the guns, okay, because they could visually see that the hammer was down. So they had a, whether it's justified or unjustified, I could see that they felt a little bit more comfortable with that. Okay, now of course the main thing was making sure the fingers off the trigger and all that, but I could visually see that the instructors were more comfortable with that. So basically, I kind of took my cues from that. Okay, if those instructors are more comfortable with people that have double action, single action guns, I should probably be more comfortable with people that had double action, single action guns. Now, remind you, I'm a student at this point. Okay, first of all, I was a student, learning, and then I was a student becoming an instructor. Okay, so I'm not going into this knowing stuff. I'm going into this not knowing stuff and basically collecting information. Okay, so the point is that this is the gun that I used in the classes, in the self-defense classes as a student. This is the gun that I used in those self-defense classes when I was becoming an instructor. Okay, now when I got my carry permit, the same mentality carried over. I would, first of all, I would not carry this big gun because this is a very big, heavy piece of metal. Okay, did not want to carry this gun. I tried carrying it. I said, okay, I did that for maybe a day, maybe half a day, and then I said, okay, I gotta get rid of this. This is just too big and heavy. And I tried carrying a snub nose 38 special, which was also big and heavy. That cylinder sticks out a lot. But again, hammered down made me feel a little bit more comfortable. For a very long time, I carried this little thing here, right? So it's a Magnum, 22 Magnum, but it's thin, okay? Very comfortable to carry. I live in a very, very low risk area, okay? So the chances of having a problem was like pretty zero, okay? But the point is, I just wanted to carry just to assert my rights, okay? That's the reason why I was carrying. It wasn't because I was really concerned about my safety. It was more because I wanted to assert my right to carry. That's a very good reason to carry, even if you are on an island by yourself. Okay. So for many years, that's what I carried. And when I would train people as an instructor, I would usually, when I was training people for self-defense type of stuff, I would use a Beretta 92, or I might use this SIG 2022, which is also a double action, single action gun. And if people want to, as now I'm building up experience, at some point, I think probably while I was taking those classes, I was taught that the Glock is really not a single action gun. That rather, when you rack the slide, it goes into a pretty much a half cock mode. And then when that take up that you feel, right, when you press the trigger, that take up is basically completing the cocking action. Okay, I learned that in that class. I understood that. I still didn't feel comfortable with that. Okay, and that's how it is, right? I'm just telling you guys how all this came about. So, and then over the years, as an instructor, I would train people. Occasionally, I would get people that would want to be trained with the Glock, and that's fine. I would train them with that. If people asked me for an opinion at that point, I would recommend a double action, single action gun, or a double action only gun, right? Like this SIG 250, right? Basically, every trigger here is a long, hard pull, okay? So I would recommend something like that. It took me a while before I started recommending Glocks as a carry gun. And believe it or not, it was actually pretty recent. The thing that got me over that hump, that made me feel comfortable with carrying striker fire guns and recommending them, is when I started building polymer 80s, right? Because by building these guns, I actually understood how they worked. I saw the three safeties, right? I saw the plunger safety. I understood how that works. I actually started to understand how the cruciform has to come back in order to completely pull back the firing pin. I could see how the trigger safety worked. I mean, you could see that before that, but I started seeing how the three safety systems all work together. And at that point, which was pretty recent, well, it was like 2 years ago, basically, even though I've been teaching people for 12 years, at that point, I really felt comfortable and I started carrying striker fired guns. Now, it wasn't just a matter of feeling comfortable, though, because there was also something with the double action guns that made me look for a different solution. I wanted to move away from them. There was something that was kind of bothering me, and the thing that was bothering me is as I was training people, I would see that under stress, like when I would have people shooting, in awkward positions. When I told them to go and reholster, they would forget to decock the gun. So they would put the gun in the holster, right, with the hammer back. Now, with the Beretta 92, it does also have a firing pin block, right? You can see how when I press the trigger a little bit, you can see how that little piece comes up, right? So it does have a firing pin block, okay? But it doesn't have the other two safety mechanisms that the Glock has when it's in this position, okay? It doesn't have a trigger safety, right? And in this position, the hammer is fully cocked. The trigger does not have to move back. From this position, basically, it just goes forward, okay? So with the Beretta 92, when people were decocking when people were forgetting to decock the gun, they were putting it in their holster with the hammer back, just relying on one of those safeties, right, the firing pin block, but not having the benefit of the other two safeties that exist in the Glock style gun. Okay, so for that reason, I'm like, okay, it doesn't make sense. It might as well just go with a Glock. Now, I did also notice that, and this included myself, even though I would train and I would get used to the change in trigger pull, right? Because you start off with double action, right, with that long hard pull. Then your subsequent shots are single action, and yeah, I would train myself to basically anticipate that change, and that worked great, like, here and now. But then, like 2 days later, I would go to shoot the gun again, and yeah, that first and second shot, after a couple of days, would kind of throw me off. After you take a couple of shots, you go through a couple of drills, you adjust quickly, but anytime you go through a short period of having not shot the double action, single action gun, when you go to shoot it, you do forget what to expect. Okay, so I was seeing that in myself. I was seeing that in people that I was training. The double action, single action change was catching people by surprise. Okay, in many cases, I would see people, right? This is on guns that they owned, right? They would basically, right? They would go to squeeze the gun, and they would do this. Hammer would just come back a little bit, and they'd be like, "Gun doesn't work." Well, that's because you gotta squeeze it harder. Okay, so that many times. So again, now I'm, basically, I first saw the problem developing. Right? I saw this problem several times before I started thinking, hey, maybe I need something different. That something different was the SIG 250, okay, which is double action only. Okay, for a while I was training people with that because I realized that this gun was actually was doing away with two of the problems that I was having. I didn't have to deal with the problem of people forgetting to decock the gun, and and basically every shot was a double action, which would mean that they would not go back and forth between expecting a light pull or expecting a heavy pull. So for a while I was using this gun to train people just because it was consistent. Okay, the problem with this double action only, even though the SIG 250 has among the lightest double action pulls out there, if you're shooting 100 200 rounds, multiple shots, boom 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 boom, your finger gets tired. Okay, so I could definitely see that my finger, after when I would shoot lots of rounds, especially if I'm speed shooting, going boom 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 boom, trying to get six shots in a row on the target over there, I would definitely see that like an hour later, my finger was a little tired, I wasn't as fast, it was definitely working against me. And but I still stayed with the SIG 250 until I started building the Polymer 80s, and I finally, I got to the point where I fully, completely understood how the Glock system worked, right? And at that point, I was 100% all in on Glocks. I carry a Glock, right? The Glock 43. I'm 100%. I 100% believe in the system. I believe in the three safeties. I can explain it to people. Okay, that's a big thing as an instructor. I feel that I need to be able to fully explain things to people. Even though I understood, right, after having taken a couple of those classes, right, early on, yeah, by the time I was done with the self-defense class, I knew I could tell people that, hey, this gun has three safeties built into it. I could see one right on the trigger. I really didn't fully understand the other two. I mean, now, yeah, you can look at it, you can see the safety plunger there, but I really didn't understand how the safety plunger and the pin fully interacted. It wasn't until I started building the Polymer 80s that I was 100% all in on Glocks for everyday carry. In fact, I would say that the Glock, or any Glock-like gun, is probably more safe to carry than an AR-15, because the safety on AR-15 blocks the stops the trigger, right? So when that safety is rolled forward, when it's in a horizontal position, right, it prevents the trigger from moving, but it doesn't block the hammer. So an AR-15 doesn't have a hammer block, okay? Whereas the Glock has a firing pin block, okay? So unless the safety plunger goes up, the firing pin cannot pass through. So the Glock is actually safer than an AR-15. So that's again, all I'm doing here is just explaining to you guys my history, how I moved away from the single action, double action gun, to the Glock gun for training and for everyday carry. Now, one of the benefits that I also found with the Glock style guns is that they do work better with gloves. So here's the thing, with the Beretta 92, when the trigger is down, basically I can kind of, sometimes I will have even thicker gloves, and that's fine, because sometimes if I had very thick gloves, the hammer might move back a little bit, but it wouldn't move back far enough. And then what happens when the gun fires, the trigger is in the rear position, so now I got plenty of room. I got plenty of room to get my finger in there, right? With the double action only, this did present a problem, because with these gloves, so when you press the trigger, right, hammer drops, your finger has to move forward to reset. Well, at that time I didn't go forward enough. Now I did. So there's a very fine line between going forward enough and not going forward enough to reset the trigger on this. So basically I almost have to go forward and make sure force my finger into the trigger guard to make sure that it clicks. And sometimes if you're shooting under stress, you don't get that. With the factory Glocks, it does work with these gloves. Does not work with thicker gloves, because the trigger guard is kind of small with this. But I can make it work with this guard. Okay, it works fine. It's just I really can't go any bigger with this. With the Polymer 80, the trigger guard is just a little bit bigger, so I can, even when the trigger's forward, my finger goes in there really easy. I can actually shoot this with even thicker gloves, not much thicker, but a little bit thicker. This works really good. So the Polymer 80s really made me like the Glock system a lot more. I think this frame is a significant improvement over the original Glock frame. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed this. Drop some comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your history is. I have a very, I guess, almost unique way of my history might be a little bit unique compared to other instructors. A lot of other instructors, maybe they have like a military background, or they have a police background, or maybe they grew up with guns, right? I grew up in the city, right? So I came into this as a student in my mid-30s, okay? Learning all this stuff, getting into the gun culture. So I went from a student, and then from, after a while of that, then I went to an instructor. Then I went to building up a clientele. So I have the path that I took is slightly different than what some other people out there might be. So, that's why my perspectives might be a little bit unique. And I'm not saying, I fully respect other paths that people took, but this is the path that I took. And, these are the things that I have learned along the way. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe, hit the bell button so you get notifications. I'll talk to you all soon.